it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 13 of my 2024 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be using Newton's Snowman. So I've stamped that image on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Simple Stories Santa's Village 6x8 pad. So I'll tear out the sheet I want to use as my color inspiration. And then I'm also going to go back to my reference photo that I've done of coloring cats in 12 different ways. This is a video that I've previously done on my channel. I'm going to open up to that chart and use that as a reference over to the side to color my cats for today's card. So I actually do not own the dies to this stamp set, so I have stamped the image directly onto what is going to become my focal panel, and I'll be coloring the background with my Copic markers. And I am going to use the shades BG Quadruple Zero, BG Triple Zero, BG 10, and BG 11. And I am actually going to work on the background first, and the reason for that is if I had colored the image first, then it would be very easy to accidentally pick up some of the color as I'm trying to add this background in and pull it into the background and just make a mess of things. This way I can just work my way around the image carefully, but if any of that light aqua blue ends up in the image where I don't want it, I can actually take my zero marker, the colorless blender, and just clean that up really easily before I go back in with my darker shades. So it just makes a little bit more sense to do the background first, in my opinion. So that's what I'm doing today. And I started with that BG 11 and started to flick in color. First kind of blocking out the image carefully and coloring in any little areas that are enclosed, like the space between the bottom of the hat and the top of the snow cat's head and the other cat's paw. Just carefully coloring that in with the BG 11, and then as I move into the lighter shades, I can be a little bit more free with my strokes, and I don't have to be as careful about not getting that color into the images. So I'm just working my way around it. I wanted it to be higher concentrated in color right around the images and then fade a bit softer as it goes out to the top and the sides. And I also wanted it to be a bit streaky, and so I am adding in extra of that BG 11 now and just adding in a few little lines to give the background some texture, a little bit of extra interest, and then I will go back and blend over that once again and just soften that up a bit. I did do a second layer of this off camera just because it does take quite a long time and I wanted to move on with the video for you guys. I didn't want to take up too long. So now I am moving on to that snow cat, and I am going to use that BG 11 once again to add my shadows. So there's a lot of things that would be casting a shadow onto this image between the scarf and the buttons and the little cat's paws and the carrot nose. So I'm just working my way slowly around that, making sure to add shadow wherever I think it should go, and also to add it to the top of the snowdrifts that are down below. And then I'll come in with that BG quadruple marker and blend that out. And then I'm going to leave a lot of the white cardstock plain so that it still looks white, but it just has that frosty glow to it. And I had forgotten to add the shadow under the coal that makes up the eyes, so I went back and added that in and then just blended that out once again. And then I'm going to start coloring in the cats. And here is where I am referring back to my chart that I have previously colored. There's so many different ways to color cats, but I have created a chart for you guys showing you 8 different color combos and different patterns and textures that you can add to just make them look a little bit more interesting. And you can of course devolve from there and, you know, change up the color palette or where you're placing your strokes, or do spots instead of stripes or stripes instead of spots. I mean, there's just so many possibilities. But for this first cat, I am going to use E21, E23, and E25 for the first set of spots. This cat is going to be kind of like a tri-tone, so it's going to be 2 different shades plus white. So I'm just working on blending that out and figuring out how big I want each of those spots to go. I'm not especially worried about the blend just yet. I'm more worried about just blocking out the patches, and then I can go back in with a little bit of extra color and kind of make sure that the blends look nice and that they kind of fade at the edges into the white of the rest of the cat's fur. The other shade that I'm going to be adding is E71, E74, and E79. This is kind of like a grayish. It's a combo between a gray and a brown, and I really, really love it for critters. So again, I'm just kind of picking and choosing a few little places to add these colors, and I try to kind of switch sides of the body, so not all of the richer brown is on one side and all of the other brown on the other. I want to mix it up and give that cat a little bit of variety, give him some personality. So once again, I am just blending that out, figuring out how big I want each of those patches to be. I want there to be a little variety in the sizes. And then I will come in with W00 and W1 and just add a little bit of shading to the white parts of the body. A lot of times I will do this first before I add my details, but I did not do that today. So I'm just working carefully around the coloring I've already done and just adding a bit of shading with that W1 and then blending out with the W00 and again leaving a bit of white cardstock showing so the cat still looks like his base layer is white. Since I have these shades out, I'm also going to add some shading now to the other 2 cats, and that way anything that I want to leave white will still have some definition to it and won't just look flat. I'm also going to use those shades to color in both of the lower cats' bellies. Those are the only 2 that show. The other one is hidden behind the snow cat, but I gave them little white bellies because I just think that's really sweet. So once I have the other 2 cats blended with those lighter W shades, I'm going to add in the E70, E71, and E74 with that W1. So I'm back to my E70s, but just a different combination of it. And that way it will tie in to the previous cat, but still look unique. So this cat is going to be a gray striped tiger cat, and I am actually starting with the E71 as my darkest, and then I'm going to blend out with the E70, and then I'll soften that even further with the W1. I am going to leave a little bit of white on this cat as well. I'm going to leave a little round area on the muzzle, the face, and the eyes. I'll also leave the tail tip white and the little paws. And then I'll come in with that E74 and start to add in my stripes. And sometimes I do these a little bit skinnier, sometimes I do them a little bit chunkier. Since these cats are a fairly large size image, I decided to go for the chunkier stripes for them. It just seemed to suit them a little bit better. But I'm adding those same stripes down the tail and on the back of the body, and even the side of that top arm that's holding the hat. And then my third cat is going to be a little tuxedo cat, so he'll be black and white. So I switched to N5, N7, and N9, and I'm starting with that N9, which is a very, very dark shade that's nearly black. And I am going to add that shadow in first. And I'm also just mapping out the areas that I want to be black and then leaving the areas that are going to be white. So once I have that done with the N9, I'll start to blend out with the N7 and just kind of go over the edge of that darkest shade and pull it into the mid-tone to eliminate any harsh lines. And then I'll come in with that N5 and kind of block out where the black areas are going to end. And again, I wanted to leave some white space on this cat because I wanted that to kind of tie all three of these kitties together, since they all have different colors and patterning. The way to make them look like they still might be siblings from the same litter is to have an identifying feature that kind of ties them all together. And for me on this card, it's going to be their white patches. I did feel like I needed a little bit of transition from the black areas into the white, so I pulled out N0 to just go over those. And now I'm going to give all of these kitties some rosy cheeks using R00, R21, and R22. I used the R22 first on the lower two cats because they're a little bit darker on their cheek area, and so I knew that I was going to need that R22 to make it bold enough that you would be able to see it. I did not do it on the gray tiger kitty at first because I thought I was going to just start with the R21, but you'll see I end up adding the R22 to that one as well. I also used just the R21 and R00 for the insides of their ears, and I used R22 with R21 for all of their noses. So I've gone back and added the darker cheeks to the tiger cat as well so that they all match. And now I'm going to keep that R22 and add in R24, R29, and R39 for my red items. If you see the pattern paper there, there are some little red bows on the tops of some of the trees. And so I wanted to tie that into the color palette here. And so I am going to use the R39 first on this large scarf that is being wrapped around the snow kitty. Now, you probably don't have to use 4 shades of red for an image of this size like I am. If you wanted to, you could just do 3, but I honestly couldn't decide if I wanted to go a little bit darker or a little bit more rosy with the R22. It has a really warm tone, and so I just decided to add all 4. So you can make a judgment call there and skip either the R39 or the R22 depending on what direction you want to go. But it did really come out quite pretty with all 4 shades. I think it turned out really vibrant. And just having a little extra highlight in there made the coloring look a bit more dynamic, I feel. So I did use all 4 shades for that Santa hat and the red scarf. And I just concentrated on those 2 images at first because I wanted to make sure that I got the right things of that scarf colored red. Once it's red, you can kind of see where it's supposed to be red, but when everything is still just the stamped image, it can be kind of tricky to follow the lines and figure out where the red is supposed to be. So I didn't want to get overwhelmed too much at once, especially since the other little accessory images that are also going to be red, I kind of needed to count stripes. I didn't end up going like perfectly in order, but I did want to make sure that there was about the same amount of space between all of the red stripes on the little scarves of the other kitties. And I also did a red pom-pom on the tuxedo kitty just to add a little splash of color up in that part of the sky. And then for the other little cat, I'm also going to be counting stripes and just picking a few here and there. Again, it doesn't have to be perfectly in order, but I did want to make sure that the stripes were at least spread out. And then I also did a section of his little knit stocking as well, stocking cap, I mean. So that is going to finish off the red. So I'm going to switch to my first green combo, and that is going to be G20, G24, and G28. And I have mentioned this in the past that there is a really big difference between the G20 and the G24. So if I'm coloring a larger image, I often also have to add in the G21, or they just don't like to blend together. But if you're coloring a small area, they seem to work pretty good. So since most of the areas were small, I decided to not pull out the G21, but I probably should have, at least for this hat band. I added a good chunk of G28 to the left side since that is tipped away from the light, and then a little bit of shadow on the right, and then blended out with the G24, and then added in my G20. And I think you can see there how they just don't like to blend together. The G20 really pushes the G24 back. But I just kind of worked at it a little bit. I don't know, I could have pulled out the G21, but I just decided to make it work, and so that's what I did. And then all the other areas that I was going to use this combo for were again going to be the smaller areas where it really doesn't matter. So I just went ahead with the 3 shades for all of those. So I'm doing another section of this little kitty on the left's hat and also the pom-pom. So we have a nice little splash of color in the sky on that side as well. And then just doing some of the stripes on his scarf. And then I'm going to switch to a brighter green since we also have that more yellowish green in the pattern paper. I went with YG01, YG03, and YG05. And I'm going to do the top section of the cat on the right's hat, and then a few more of the little chevron stripes on his scarf. I'll do the hat band of the cat on the left, and then the rest of the stripes on his scarf. And then I am also going to do the little fish in green. I was kind of going back and forth about if I should do it gray, but I just thought that fresh green would be something a little unexpected, so that's what I went with. And just to give this lighter green a bit more emphasis, since all of the other areas that I used it on were pretty small, I also decided to use it for the scarf of my last kitty. And then for the white parts of the rest of the items, I decided to go with C0 and C1. I didn't want to use anything that I had already used on any of the cats, just to make it stand out. And then I am going to switch to C5, C7, and C9 for the coal and the top hat. So I'm using the C9 for those first, adding a little bit of shading to the coal on the right. And then I'm also going to shade the hat, just like I did the hat band, but I'm also going to add some extra shading on the underside of the hat, since that would really not be getting any light, since it's just right above that snow cat. So I'm blending out the C9 with the C7, just being really careful with that dark shade, especially since this image is now nearly colored, so I really don't want to mess up anything with this dark color that would be hard to remove. So I'm going to fill in with the C5 and just make sure that I have a little nice highlight on the front of that hat. So I'm kind of going in almost like a U shape up towards the top and then filling that in. And then all that's left is the little carrot. So I'm going to use YR12, YR14, and YR18 for that. Just filling that in nice and easy. And then I am going to trim down this panel with the second largest of the Lawn Fawn large stitched rounded rectangle stackables. I keep my large and small together, that's why it's the third one down, but it is the second of the large ones. I'm going to hold that in place with a little bit of post-it tape and run that through my die cutting machine. And I think that panel turned out super, super cute, and I love that stitch detail along the edges. So I wanted to pop that focal panel into my MISTI so that I can stamp some snowflakes around the background. I just thought that would give it a little bit more interest and make it look more like a holiday scene. So I've taken the 2 snowflakes that come with the Newton's Snowman stamp set, and I'm going to just keep shifting them in position on my MISTI and stamping them all around using Lawn Fawn's Merman ink. And I will even slide my focal panel over slightly so that I can stamp off the edges to make it look like this is just a snapshot of a fuller scene. So I did that quite a few times until I filled up every bit of space except for the area where I want to stamp my sentiment. And then once I am ready to do that, I'm going to bring in some Lawn Fawn jalapeno ink. And I'm stamping a sentiment that is also from that same stamp set, and it says Feline Frosty, which I think is really cute. And I'm going to stamp that down twice, and I think that green just goes so nicely with the greens that I used with my Copics. So I'll set that aside, and then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using Lawn Fawn's Cilantro cardstock. And I'm going to stamp a sentiment and an image from another Newton's Nook stamp set called Frozen Friends. And I continued using the jalapeno ink. I maybe should have switched to Noble Fir because it is quite a bit darker. But instead I just went ahead and stamped this down 4 times to make sure it was nice and bold because the ink does dry back a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure that it would still be legible. And then I'm going back to my pattern paper pad, the Santa's Village from Simple Stories, and I wanted to use 2 more prints to combine with the original print that I had pulled out for my inspiration. And I ended up going with this green gingham and this red and white polka dot, which I thought were both really fun. So I'm going to trim all of these down with my paper trimmer. And then I'm going to selectively die cut just the bottom of the green gingham print using the Lawn Fawn Stitch Party Banners dies just to give it a fishtail edge. So the Christmas tree print is going to cover the entire card front. It is an A2 standard size card, so 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2. And then the red and white polka dot I'm going to add across the card horizontally, and then the green gingham flag end banner I'm going to add vertically down the center, and that's going to just end right above the bottom of the card, so it just gives it a nice little festive detail and also adds another little bit of stitching which will tie in the focal panel. So I've popped up my focal panel on some foam tape, and I'm just lining that up on my card front, making sure it's on there nice and straight, and then I'll pop that down into place. And all that's left is to add a bit of sparkle to this card. I love using Stardust stickles on almost all my cards, but I definitely love adding them at Christmas time because it just gives such a frosty, festive feel. So I'm adding that to all of the snow, which includes, of course, the snow cat. And then I also added a tiny dot to the very center of each of those snowflakes, just so we would get a little flash of that as we tip the card into the light. And I felt like I still needed a little bit more, so I decided to add it to the hat band and the pom-pom on each of my little kitties and the fish on the Snow Kitty's top hat. And that is going to finish up this card. I will lift that up so you can see all of the detail and hopefully catch some of that sparkle and shine, and of course give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun playing with this stamp set and the pattern papers. I love the traditional Christmas colors. So if you enjoyed it too, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. The products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 13 of the previous 2 years of Holiday Card Series. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.